Welcome back into Bartholomew Town. It's Bill Bartholomew, Connor Burbridge. Welcome back to the show. You're running in a primary race against the one and only Jack Reed. We talked about this in depth earlier this year, and anybody who's interested should just search Connor's name. Wherever you're listening right now, you'll find the episode that really explores kind of why you did this and the origins. But how's it going out there?
It's going great, Bill. Again, thanks for having me back on. I'm really excited to be here to share with your listeners what we've been doing over the last, year or so. And I mean, we've been building momentum, day after day, month after month. The last poll in June had us about 25%, and that's with very little resources, just really through, the values of our campaign, our grit, courage, and moral clarity. And that's what we keep going. And, people resonate. And I think it's just the Rhode Island electorate, Rhode Island Democratic voters want the policies that we're putting forward. They want someone that's going to aggressively take on the Trump administration. They want someone that calls out the bullshit that's going on with billionaires and big corporations and how we have to change our tax code so we can effectively tax them. They want Medicare for all and a quality healthcare system. And, this is the ideas that we're putting forward and people resonate. And day after day, it's just more and more people are getting on board with our campaign and becoming one of our supporters. And so, yeah, it's incredible to see.
What kind of dollars have you been able to raise, and what kind of, network of volunteers and so forth, the machine have been able to put out there in terms of, you're primarying somebody who's got, obviously just long-term incumbent status, name recognition, and a machine behind them. So are you able to do anything that can compete in that realm?
Yeah, so I think we've been able to build out a pretty impressive ground game for the level of resources that we have. I think for a lot of people, they'll know that fundraising has been, one of the weaknesses of our campaign. But in some ways, it's also been a strength because we're not taking any money from APAC. We're not taking any money from big corporate PACs, like Amazon.com, Blue Origin, Raytheon. These are my opponent, Jack Reed's biggest funders. And so in some ways, it's been a strength because people also really resonate and respect those principles. And then on top of that, we've been able to build a really impressive ground game. So we're running concurrent canvases across the whole state, in multiple towns over the weekends. We've been able to hit the majority of towns across Rhode Island to knock on doors, leave flyers for people and get to talk to people one-on-one about the issues that matter.
I think it's really interesting right now in general. I mean, there's an example in real time, David Morales, Representative Morales, primarying Mayor Smiley. And look, there's a huge financial gap there, no question. But the ground game itself, you can't use, financial elements of a campaign and it definitely can lend insight into viability. Sure, I'm not going to dismiss it, but ground game in and of itself can also sort of, I don't want to say offset that, but can exist in a way that elevates the campaign into at least, where it deserves and ought to be at minimum noted. So ground game alone, you have crossed that threshold from an observational standpoint. So are you getting any kind of, reaction from the Reed campaign that you're out there? Have you challenge them to any debates? Are they doing anything to sort of push against what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I think we'll put this out there once again. We want to have, an open debate with Senator Reed, even a policy forum, just so that we can present to the voters one-on-one so they can make an informed choice in September. And we've asked him multiple times. We've sent emails, we've had people go in our stead and try and host. And, we're just getting crickets time and time again. So I ask, the listeners here today that if you really want to hear the difference between my vision for the Democratic Party and for politics and Senator Reed's and the way we both plan and have presented to take on this administration, right? This horrible administration, then please, give him a call, send him an email. If you have a contact on his team, reach out to him because he's just dodging us time and time again. And it's right. It's not like polling. We're polling pretty effectively enough that, we're going to have a pretty significant challenge, that he's going to have a pretty significant challenge come September. And so just we're not sure the radio silence, we're waiting on an answer and we're ready to go. when he is.
What are the pollings that you're what are the polls that you're referencing there? Are they internals?
Yeah, no, well, we did one internal that had us at about 25%, but no, these are validated UNH, University of New Hampshire polls.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. In the UNH poll that where did you poll at in that one? You were ranging somewhere in like the 15 to 23%, to read 63, 65. So you've got some level of, like I said, you've definitely got some level of introduction into the field. And I think that's important. Again, there's a distinction to be made between candidates who are, just sort of getting in the mix to kind of do their thing. They got a grudge. There's one guy, I think, that's running in a governor's race that's just, running on a grudge or something like that. And that's different from bringing actual issues and contrast on a line by line basis with a level of support and a level of reaction. You've generated that online. So that to me is just something I'm saying this to the audience, not to you. I'm saying this to the audience out there. When you're evaluating these types of challengers, I think it's important to not just say it's a write-off, Reed's going to win, doesn't matter what anybody does. Because at minimum, from an idea standpoint, you're introducing ideas into the conversation that are absolutely worth discussing. So not that your candidacy needs qualification, but I just feel like we're at that moment now where people are getting bombarded by bombarded by candidates left, right, and center. And there are some people who have been at this for a while. You've been at this for a while in this campaign cycle. Have you seen momentum grow as this cycle has gone on?
Yeah. So at least, from my understanding, in April, I believe the UNH poll had us at 15%. By June, we were at 25. We're waiting for their July, early August poll that we expect to come out, sometime in the next few weeks. And so we'll see what kind of growth we've had there. But, we, like I said, in that same time, right, we've had the warmer months. We have plenty of nice weather to knock on doors, to be out in the community at community events, talking to people, engaging with people. And yeah, Bill, I also just want to add to your point of that, like, this campaign, right, as much as this is an uphill battle, like we are fighting like to win. And we have policies that will be ready on day one, right? That are novel and unique policies. And that's kind of part of our working class agenda. A few of those are universal elder care, right? Because Medicare doesn't cover things like assisted living, at-home care by a family member. In a few years, by 2030, 25% of our state will be over 65. And so, like, elder care is a huge issue that we need to tackle, and the current system is very inadequate, and it's failing a lot of families, quite frankly. We don't hear any of these policies from Senator Reed to address our, energy crisis, right? Energy bills are through the roof. People are struggling with bills and daily costs, right? So we're proposing helping states and communities buy back their utilities from the greedy companies that own them through public utilities, right? And then, a last one is we're proposing an amendment to the U.S. Constitution for equal education for all, right? Like, I think at my fiance is a public school teacher. I think anyone that, sees the current state of public schools knows that teachers are really struggling and a lot of school districts are really struggling. Charahoe had a budget. It's not just Providence, Pawtucket. Like Charahoe had some budget struggles. And so, right, by passing this amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and putting it forward, at least, our party is taking a clear stand that every student in this country deserves a high-quality education. And I think that's something that Americans across the board can get behind, especially, and certainly people in Rhode Island, the good people of Rhode Island, can get behind those kinds of ideas. And I think, Rhode Islanders want our leaders to represent these kind of bold, ambitious ideas at the federal level. We have a huge opportunity with this state, right? We're a small state. It's really easy to campaign here and go to every single town. And so, yeah, Jack Reed has more money than God and in his campaign coffers. And what does he do with it, right? Like, there's a difference between grassroots democracy and lazy democracy. And lazy democracy is when all you do is run digital ads and TV commercials. And, certainly that helps with a little bit of information. But with that amount of money that he has, right, he can run one of the biggest ground operation that Rhode Island has ever seen, bring voters back into the electorate, engage them right where they are at their home about the key issues that matter, and he doesn't. And so, I think that's the type of leadership that our state wants to see, is leaders who are going to say, hey, I'm going to fight as hard as I can to bring every single voter, right, whether they're red or blue or independent, back into the democratic process and engage with them where they're at. And I mean, yeah, so like that, he takes all that corporate money, but where does it go to? TV commercials, digital ads? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what people are saying to you right now with Rhode Island facing, I mean, among, if not the highest rates in the country right now when it comes to energy. And look, the Governor McKee just declared a state of emergency that releases funds from the, the gas cap and tax initiative. People are going to get about $60 total off their electric bill this winter to compensate for the increase, right? What do people say when you talk about nationalizing the electric grid? How do people react to that type of idea?
Yeah, I think that idea, I mean, I think in general, people really resonate with just ambitious proposals, right? I think people aren't stupid. They understand the depth of the problems that we're facing as an economy, in the economy and as a state in healthcare. And I think those kind of meek proposals, right, that we see time and time again from the Democratic Party, people are just so tired of it. Like they say these are stale proposals. And so they might not agree with every proposal I put out, but I think they appreciate the effort to be able to dream big and, fight hard. And that's the energy that my campaign brings. And people, whether they agree with me on everything or not, they respect that type of energy and those types of principles. And I think in general, right, people, this kind of ethos of the last 40 years that the private market does everything perfectly, government is useless, the worst words you ever hear is, I'm the government, I'm here to help, blah, blah, blah. I think people, no longer have that faith in the private market. And they're like, you know what? Maybe public investment is a good thing. Maybe the public, the government can help deliver quality healthcare, can help deliver affordable bills, can help deliver good housing, and I think people are willing to take that chance and be open to those ideas, because things have just gotten so bad for regular working Rhode Islanders across the board.
Yeah, I bingo. Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity right now. Forget about the national political trends. Forget about Michigan. Forget about New York State, the DSA movement, all of that. That is in and of itself one conversation. I think there's a conversation right now exactly like you just said. You just outlined something extremely interesting, which is that the pattern of moving away from government, faith in government, is now starting to apply more and more to the private sector. And what that requires, you would think, it would be a response that the government in some ways says, hey, come back to us. The problem is here in Rhode Island, I use this example when it comes to like the grid. It's like, oh, good. Let's nationalize the utilities. If I went around and said, hey, everybody, throw a couple of bucks into this bucket, we're going to all throw down on some wind turbines, put them out in the ocean, and then everyone, that'll power your house. That would be a completely different mindset than the existing infrastructure. I think you'd have a lot more buy-in. So nationalizing the grid, okay, that's an interesting idea, except for then when you look at the Washington Bridge, you go, do I want the Peter Alviti of electricity to be running the electricity on behalf of the government versus private sector, which has a different type of accountability? So no matter where people go right now, it feels like the natural return back to government, it's not as simple as it may seem, even though I think you perfectly outlined the shift of people having faith in the private sector. So how do you bring people back into government in a way that they feel not only is this benefiting, is a natural return from private sector management, but is also a better solution and one that they can believe in when they look around and they see a Washington Bridge, for example? Our election season content is supported by RIPHI, the Rhode Island Public Health Institute. RIPHI is an independent nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing complex health disparities in Rhode Island and beyond. RIPHI oversees a diverse range of public health programs addressing issues from healthy food access to infectious disease prevention. They also conduct research related to population health and train students and public health practitioners for fulfilling careers In Rhode Island's workforce, RIPHI owns and operates Open Door Health, the state's first and only LGBTQ+ focused, community-based clinic. Open Door Health provides primary care, sexual health care, and fully integrated behavioral health care to nearly 6,000 patients across the state. Learn more at riphi.org. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Bartholomew Town is proud to partner with Waterfire. Visit waterfire.org. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience message and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. And by the way, join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. Bartholomew Town is proud to partner with Newport Film. Visit newportfilm.com. Follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting point because, I think people who share my type of politics, right, in this big embrace of public power, government helping deliver for working people, a lot of those people also believe that the government should work more efficiently and, should deliver better services for people, just customer service 101. And it's not doing that effectively. And there's, a lot of leaders across our country who have D's next to their name and R's next to their name who are responsible for those, types of for that type of delivery and for that loss of faith. And I think, it's a tough conversation because the state capacity, the ability of our government to do these types of projects, especially after this administration, the Trump administration, is going to be so broken. And I think that's why it's so important right now, as opposed to what we've had for the last 30 years from Jack Reed, right? We need leaders who have vision, who have ambition, and who are ready on day one with a new agenda. Because we don't have time to spend 8 years trying to rebuild our federal government. Like, we need to go and we need to have ambitious proposals to rebuild. And I just think, outlining that we're going to do this better, that we're going to do this efficiently, and ultimately, right, and this is part of what this primary is about, is what does the Democratic Party stand for, right? Alviti, he was probably a Democrat. He was certainly appointed by a Democratic governor, right? And so, but you ask people on the street, what does the Democratic Party stand for? You'll get 1,000 different answers. Part of what I think is on the ballot on September 9th in this primary, right, for U.S. Senate is, do you want a Democratic Party that fights for the working class, or do you want a Democratic Party that continues business as usual? And so, every day, I want to fight for the working class. I fight for the common good. That's what I do at my 9-to-5 job. That's what I do outside of my free time. Jack Reed, he believes what he believes, and I certainly don't think he's putting forward these kinds of ambitious proposals. And so that's what's on the ballot in September. And I ask everyone to consider that when they go to the polls.
Let me ask you this. Last year, Jack Reed brought in, and again, I understand the context here on defense, and there's a broader discussion that you can hear Connor's position on in the previous podcast we did, pretty well detailed, but this is from an economic development question or standpoint. Last year, $15.3 billion brought in on the Virginia-class submarines, in the Columbia-class submarines, $190 million to the Naval War College in Newport for the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. Also $20 million for a Rhode Island University competition on basic military research, money towards electromagnetic sensor facilities, $244 million for workforce training, $32 million for the National Guard, $7.6 billion in annual economic impact, et cetera, et cetera. So there's, whether or not you agree with the tenets behind those numbers, they do exist. They fuel Rhode Island's economy. It's one of the pillars of Rhode Island's economy right now, defense sector. Jack Reed goes away. I'm not saying those dollars all go away. A lot of them do, though. How do you make up for the lost in the impact economically if you replaced Reed and you were opposed philosophically to continuing the relationships in the defense sector?
Yeah, so I think I mainly want to talk about the defense sector. I think there's the appropriations part of that, which we can kind of put on hold. But in terms of the defense sector, right, weapons manufacturers has grown to about 11%, 10% of Rhode Island's GDP. That is a huge percentage. A lot of these contracts, of which you just talked about, those are 10 plus year contracts that are already secured. They're already signed into law, right? And so we're not talking about doing anything with those. So electric boat and a lot of these industries, they are quite secure. I think I have a question of how much of our children's future we want to have tied to endless conflict abroad. I think that's a question Rhode Islanders should ask ourselves. But I think there's also, right, so those are 10, 15-year contracts. Jack Reed hopefully will not be running if he wins the primary. What is he going to run at 82 to be a 90-year-old senator, or late 80s? He's going to pass, and these relationships, a torch needs to be passed at some point. While we have 10 to 15 years, right, with these contracts secured, I also think it's time to look at new sectors, right? Offshore wind. So GE Vernova, which is one of the biggest energy companies in the world, an offshoot of General Electric, right? Their offshore wind subsidiary is based in southern France. Why is that not based in Quonset Point, Rhode Island? What would our economy look like if we grow offshore wind and green manufacturing to 10% of GDP, right? How much will our state be thriving now? So, my proposal is like those relationships are built, those contracts are there in defense, whatever, we're not going to touch them. But now we need new relationships, new ideas, and new vision to build, strengthen the economy of Rhode Island, to bring in new industry. Wind's very competitive, right? Like New Bedford wants wind, Connecticut, the port of New York City, they all want part of this wind development, right? They see it on the future, right? We need a senator, and we have, the gift of being a small state, but we have a senator who can really go to bat for us to bring that investment here to Rhode Island. And right now, wind is less than 1% of GDP, right? They can brag about those investments all they want, but right, let's see the plan to grow offshore wind and green manufacturing to 10% of GDP. And that's the kind of ideas and energy and the relationships that I will build in the U.S. Senate for our state.
Yeah, I think if you can flesh that out into something that incorporates the reality of the Trump administration and just the reality of the Total deal literally being paid off $1 billion to stop working on offshore wind in this country, if you can parlay that out into a longer term vision, I think that a lot of Rhode Islanders would hear that and go, well, yeah, we want that shift. We understand defense manufacturing and the realities of the world that we live in, et cetera, et cetera. Even, if you're at all a realist, you would have to accept that. But you would also want the notion of why can't green tech, why can't ocean tech, blue tech, renewables, et cetera, why can't that exceed the defense sector? That's not an unreasonable ask. So I think that's what those numbers look like. Like I said, it's all imaginary until Donald Trump's out of there. I mean, offshore wind in the Trump administration is, it's tough, man, right? But we'll see. At the same time, leadership, and a change in temperament of what the Senate and House brings. If the majority flips, that could also change what the priorities are, where the Trump administration backs off. So it's not an insane idea, that's for sure.
Yeah, and just to add that to that too. Yeah, I know, like with a lot of these proposals, right, people will be like, oh, but the Trump administration, but the Republican, trifecta currently. I mean, one, it's set, right, this midterms, it's set to break pretty hard. But I think in some ways, right, like you have to be like, if you're working with a big, multinational company like General Electric, Veranova, right? Like, you need to build those relationships now. Like, you don't just show up when the Democrats are back in power and be like, all right, guys, like, come to Rhode Island, right? You worked out a plan with them. You built, what incentives do they want? What incentives would be effective? What kind of infrastructure do they want? Do they need workforce housing? Do they want workforce training, right? Like, those programs, you could work with state government to build while the Trump administration is still in power, and just to lay that foundation and groundwork for when we are back in power on day one. Look at all these investments that are happening. Look, the Democratic Party cares about manufacturing, good manufacturing, jobs for across this country, not just war manufacturing, right? Clean, green manufacturing across this country and in Rhode Island. And we worked in opposition to build these relationships, and now we're ready to deliver the policy on day one. And I mean, that's what a good leader does. That's what a good plan looks like. And so, yes, we're in opposition now. I mean, that's the time where we lay the plans, we build the relationships, so we are ready to go and hit the ground running.
Connor Burbridge running for United States Senate, primarying Jack Reed in the Democrat primary. Early voting starts pretty soon, and I'm not sure exactly what day we're going to release this, so I don't want to say exactly when, but pay attention and you'll be able to vote pretty easily here. Yeah, man, keep it up. I think there's a real value to what you're doing, and there's ample detractors to anybody out there who gets into a political race. And I say it's great leadership just for other people out there that are honestly either not ready to step up for legitimate reasons, or are not willing to step up. So from that standpoint, thanks for stepping up, man.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Bill, thank you. Thank you to all the listeners. Thank you to the supporters across our state who might be listening. I'm doing this because of you all, because the energy that you bring every day. So thank you all so much for your support across Rhode Island. It means a lot.
The first Rhode Island Democratic Gubernatorial Candidate Forum is in the books, but the conversation is just beginning. Hosted by Bill Bartholomew, hear from Democratic candidates Helena Folks and Governor Dan McKee as they make their case to voters. Listen now at ripodcast.com or watch the full conversation at 997wpro.com.